When booting up Sonic Heroes for the first time, I was surprised to see a team without a hog at the helm. I mean, look at these guys. They don't even seem cohesive. A ninja, a kid, and a music-loving crocodile, all of them struggling to pay the bills at their detective agency. In a world as grand and whimsical as Sonic's, such a mundane yet equally relatable motivation somehow made these guys feel even more absurd. In the best way possible. It's just comically endearing to watch this scraggly trio who struggle with relatively normal problems step up to face mad scientists, robot dragons, and alien dictators. When combined with their fun and unique designs, classic or otherwise, their sparse appearances made them a pleasant surprise whenever they happened to show up. Basically, the Chaotix just give off, "Hey, those are my boys!" energy, and I am here for it, making the universe of Sonic feel a bit more like a living, breathing world. So you can imagine my complete dismay when I learned that, after their introduction in Knuckles Chaotix back in 1995, most of these fellas vanished for nearly a decade, before returning reimagined and recontextualized with one less armadillo at their side. And in between, they weren't really used for anything. In the games, at least. Because in the Archie Sonic comic, these fellas were never forgotten. No, Archie took the name Knuckles Chaotix seriously, and gave them the respect they deserve. This wild group consists of none other than Rad Red himself, Knuckles the Echidna. Then there's Charmy B, the tiniest of them all, Espio the Chameleon, the sneakiest of them all, Mighty the Armadillo, the strongest of them all, and of course, their final member, a beast who moves to the beat of his own drum.
Yo, hey, what's happening, dude? I'm the rep with the rap for being rude. When it comes to a fight, I'm no defector. Don't nobody mess with a croc named Vector. He's the best of the Chaotix. I like him a lot. Whenever he appears, I know it's gonna rock. Hitting on the ladies, dancing with doves, making fun of Knuckles. One true love. Oh, who's that? Villains beware. Vector's ready to give you a scare. He's got the rhythms. He's got the rhymes. This crazy croc is my motherfucking god.
Right from their introduction, the Chaotix are a lot of fun. A goofy group of guys who, much like their game counterparts, feel like genuine friends brought together by circumstance. They rag on each other, play tag, argue about the ladies, and stand up for their pals. It's a simple but likable dynamic that always managed to get a smile or a laugh out of me. They also benefit from the fact that, much like the rest of the Knuckles comic, their stories are a trip. Sometimes literally, like when Charmy B's friend Mello gets too much lemon sundrop dandelion from a drug-laced chili dog at Renfield T. Rodent's amusement park. A story that also leads to Charmy learning that he shouldn't run away from his royal responsibilities, and that it's about time he settled down and got married. A decision that the comic sticks to. This newlywed honeybee is getting busy, and he doesn't have time for his boys like he used to. Heck, this causes some drama for the other guys, especially when Knuckles starts to discover that his favorite color might be pink. However, even though this relationship is often a source of comedy, there's plenty of heart too. These guys truly care about each other. I mean, when Knuckles briefly dies, and you know that works, right? Sometimes people just briefly die. Here they are, leaning on each other. Vector and Mighty even offering Knuckles' girlfriend Julie Sue some much needed support. But here's the thing. Outside of Vector, I can't say any of these dudes felt that distinct to me. Instead, they all generally serve as vessels for Ken Penders' writing quirks and pervasive elder speak. But they still work well as a group, as Knuckles' crazy pals and Penders' way of exploring the often hilarious brotherly bonds of male friends. In fact, the only time these characters didn't work for me was when Penders tried to separate them for more serious, character-focused individual stories. Those were either a bit confusing, emotionally flat, or both. And in Espio's case, the art, Espio's looking rather, yeah. All this means that, even though I really liked the Chaotix, I still felt there was room to do even more with them, to make me care and maybe even love them as individuals. Usually this is where I'd say that new head writer Ian Flynn came in and made each of the Chaotix one of my favorites. Instead, the results were a lot more varied than I expected. A little more chaotic. So let's dive into why I think the Archie Chaotix are the best Chaotix. This video is sponsored by Flexispot. As I'm sure many of you do, I spend a lot of time at my computer, especially when I'm editing videos. For a while, I've been considering getting a more ergonomic chair because I do get some back and shoulder pain, which is why when Flexispot offered to send me their C7 Max chair, I took it. And yeah, it's comfortable, it's good, Between the adjustable headrest, backrest, seat depth, and 5D armrest that you can swivel all over the place, it's got plenty of options for you to sit the way that's most comfortable for you. There's even a hidden footrest. Then we've got the memory foam seat cushion and a design that gives plenty of lumbar support. So yeah, if you're interested in trying out a Flexispot ergonomic chair for yourself, check out my link in the description and use code C730 for $30 off. With a 30-day return policy and a 10-year warranty, I think it's worth giving a shot for those of you who spend a lot of time at the computer and are looking for an upgrade. Plus, right now they have their Black Friday sale, which you can check out on their website. All right, let's get back to the Chaotix. As far as Vector goes, Flynn's job was easy. Just let him be Vector. That's all I ask for. Call me Florida man, because I'm ready to wrangle some gators, baby. Fortunately, that's exactly what Flynn does. Vector is every bit as hilarious as he's always been. In fact, he's even funnier, and Tracy Yardley's incredibly expressive art certainly does a lot to contribute to that. Vector still has a bit of a short fuse, still thinks he's all that, still always speaks his mind, and has plenty of funny one-liners.
Ray, ixnay on my history, hey.
And yet, Flynn adds something to his character. He digs into a deep, dark secret, a disturbing piece of lore hidden beneath the murky waters of the infested swamp that is this Crazy Croc's chaotic past. Down, under the surface, Vector is actually Australian. I love this. First off, it manages to make Vector's prior material even funnier. Now this rap-loving cool guy is actually trying to hide his down-under accent because for some reason it embarrasses him and he'd rather leave this past behind. I don't even need to know why. The simple fact that this is a thing is already enough to make me love Vector even more. Speaking of loving him more, I really like what Flynn does with Vector's relationship with Julie Sue. Now, they'd previously connected, but their more heartfelt interactions were few and far between. In general, they'd usually rag on each other, argue, and fight. But, while we're still going to keep their banter, the general tone is a bit different. Now there's more of an emphasis placed on how these two truly care for each other, shown in some small moments and some larger. Like how Vector is the first to back up Julie Sue when it comes to defending their boy Nux, or how excited he is to show that he knew Knuckles would return after said couple had their first big argument. There's a sibling-esque quality to their dynamic, and even if it's rarely a major focus, it makes the world feel more alive. Similar to his really funny, disgruntled yet caring older brother dynamic with Ray, a character who's usually more attached to Mighty. Again, it's nothing huge, but sometimes a little goes a long way. Actually, that's how I feel about Vector in general. He never gets some major character-defining moment that I can point to and go, there it is, that's why I love him. No, he's just always fun, always good. Whether he's backing up his bros, lifting this granny into the air to let her know it's time to party, poking fun at his friends, or giving surprisingly on-the-money pep talks. Vector is an absolute joy, and that's all he needs to be. All in all, this croc is just super charming. And speaking of charm, you better believe it's time for us to talk about the charm of... Out of all the Archie Chaotix, Espio was probably my least favorite pre-Flynn. Don't get me wrong, there was nothing that bad about him, but much like a certain purple walrus, he's just this guy, you know? Like there's very little I can look at and go, yes, that right there is Espio. More than any of the others, he exists as part of this group, with next to nothing outside of his design to set him apart. And yet, through a clever use of the comic's wider lore, Flynn manages to give him a unique role among the comic's cast, and a compelling conflict with the Chaotix. As far as I can tell, Espio being a ninja wasn't really a thing before Sonic Heroes. Naturally, that means Archie Espio wasn't a ninja either. At most, he used some kunai in combat, but it was purely aesthetic. So Flynn's first part of making Espio feel more distinct is to just pull from Heroes. Now Espio is a full-on ninja spy, going on missions alone, breaking into Eggman's bases, getting info on his plans, and even blowing up one of his fortresses because Eggman hurt Charmy's family. It's not anything huge, but it is a great way to make Espio feel more unique. To give me elements of his character I can clearly latch onto as we see his individual abilities, and more importantly, the stoicism that underlies his obvious love for and protectiveness of his friends. However, Espio really comes into his own in the Iron Dominion arc, when the unknown details of his past come into conflict with his friends. See, he's secretly been sent on a mission by his clan to spy on Angel Island, which is how he came to know Knuckles in the first place. However, when his people are taken over by the Iron Queen, his loyalties come into question. And so, when his friends learn this, well, that's obviously going to cause some problems. Now their relationship with Espio is built on a false pretense, leading to a natural question. How much of this is real? Watching Espio try to balance these two sides of himself is where he's at his most interesting. On one hand, he clearly doesn't think he can go against his people, his own family, even if he disagrees with what they're doing. On the other hand, he refuses to harm his friends. Really, it seems any decision here would be a betrayal of himself. Yet, through clever logical loopholes, he manages to still inform his friends of what little he can, and get out of a situation where he otherwise would have been forced to harm Knuckles and give the enemy a dangerous weapon. Ultimately, Espio's willingness to bend the rules of his clan is what allows our heroes to retrieve the weapon they need to fully save the day, inspiring his people to take steps beyond simply watching from the shadows. However, the thing that makes this really compelling is that even after Espio rejoins the group, this isn't simply brushed under the rug. He tries to tell the full truth now, holding nothing back as he wants his friends to once again believe in him. And yet, that's easier said than done. The art and dialogue really sells the tension of this scene, the uncertainty of a group that wants to go back to normal, but also doesn't know if that's possible. Each character's reaction is individual, with some caring a whole lot more than others. There's Knuckles' grumpiness and frustration, Vector's confident cockiness giving way to discomfort, Julie Sue's refusal to let Espio get an easy out, and most importantly of all, Mighty's laid-back attitude about the whole thing. Give him a break, Knuckles. You know he's one of the good guys. Yeah, I doubt you would be so forgiving if he'd been keeping something from you. Actually, I'm pretty certain your parents are gone, but evidence points to your sister being alive, and part of a Dark Egg Legion chapter. I'm sorry. I wanted to investigate more before I said anything. And after this moment, the Chaotix are fractured until the very end of Preboot. Not even because they won't forgive each other, but because, now that Mighty has this information, he and Ray need to go off searching for any clues they can find. Even so, there's the sense that if Espio had done something earlier, if he'd been honest, maybe things could have turned out different. Maybe they would have all been able to stay together. And the comic really commits to this feeling by having Espio be separated from the group for a long, long while. Yet, strangely enough, the terrible experience is what puts him in the perfect position to help someone else. See, after losing control of herself, the freedom fighter's advanced AI Nicole has been shunned by the city, left isolated and afraid and guilt-ridden. However, Espio refuses to leave her alone, because even if it isn't exactly the same, he knows more of what she's going through than anyone else. After all, he was also used by others, betrayed his friends with far more agency than she did, and ultimately lost everyone's trust. In the same way that he's refused to give up on rebuilding those bridges, he won't let his friend believe she's truly alone. And though it's such a simple thing, I appreciate how this is the note Espio's story lands on. Not in his secrets, but on this openness and connection with his friend. On using the mistakes he's made to give him the perspective necessary to understand and help someone else. And that's what makes Archie Espio the best Espio. When Flynn came onto the comic, one of his goals was to generally get the characters to be more in line with their game counterparts. However, that didn't mean he wanted to abandon what made them unique in this world. Naturally, this resulted in a careful balancing act of slowly shifting these characters, keeping them consistent with themselves while also bringing in other elements. For some characters, this was relatively easy. For others, it was not. In the games, Charmy B is a silly, childish character, the innocent kid of the Chaotix. In the Archie Sonic comics, however, he isn't. No, he's a married man of royal nobility who honestly doesn't have that much time for these chaotic shenanigans. Not because he doesn't enjoy them, but because he has other responsibilities. You can probably see the problem here already. How on Mobius do you bridge the gap between these two versions of the character and make them feel cohesive? Really, this seems like one of the only characters where this transition or balancing act might be impossible. But apparently, Flynn didn't think so. Because, in one of the lowest moments for our heroes, Eggman destroys their home and kidnaps nearly everyone, trapping them in these machines that'll sap their life force. And Charmy B is among the prisoners. Though Sonic and a few others manage to get there in time to rescue him, they don't entirely succeed, because something has already happened to Charmy B. This is it. This is... And a lot of people do not like this. Some think it's too cruel or mean-spirited. Some even find it a bit offensive. Some just think there were far better ways to get Charmy to be more like his game counterpart. After all, if this is the basis of Charmy's fun-loving personality, it makes it pretty hard to find it all that fun. Now, anytime he's acting childish or silly, there's a dark undercurrent. Charmy isn't simply like this, he was made into this, losing his old self in the process. So yeah, I can definitely see why some wouldn't enjoy that. And yet, I'm not here to join in. I'm here to do what must be done. The only thing that can be done. I'm here to provide. I never cared much about Archie's version of Charmy B. Not that I particularly disliked him, it's just, he's here as another member of the group, you know? Really, the most memorable, noteworthy thing about him never had to do with him as a character. It was what happened to him. Like, he's just such a normal little guy who goes through all this weird stuff. Getting drugged, his best friend's death, marriage. All this is to say that I wasn't attached to Charmy's personality. So seeing a change that serves to make him stand out more, well, I'm fine with that. Even more than that, since he was often defined by what happened to him, this moment actually feels strangely suitable for him. And you know what? I'll say it. I actually think it's pretty meaningful. Because this doesn't come out of nowhere. No, this is one last gut punch after the hero's defeat. A way for Eggman to show that, even though they managed to win in the end, they didn't do it without a casualty. Charmy is the proof of Eggman's power and malice, the after effects of this moment that will remain. In this way, Charmy is something of a narrative sacrifice. A character altered for the sake of making the stakes of this world feel more real and earned. However, this is still meaningful to Charmy himself, too. After all, when Eggman taunts him and chooses to make an example of him, what's Charmy's response? Despite it all, I've fought for our world. No matter what you do to me, I will still fight for Mobius, and I'm not alone. And this right here, it's effectively a distillation of the whole arc's theme. Eggman's flaw here was thinking that he just needed to defeat Sonic. But that isn't the case. As Charmy says, they will keep fighting. All the freedom fighters, all their friends. And even if Charmy loses his mind, those words remain true. Because his friends are still standing. He's still fighting. And from here, outside of a handful of moments, Charmy isn't played for laughs. No, he's generally in the background. There's even this moment where Knuckles is lost and confused, but Charmy is able to give him some words of advice, letting him know that maybe he should take a step back from all of his stresses and worries for a moment, even if the world is dark and life is hard. Something he knows about all too well. Really, the most unfortunate thing about Charmy is simply that he isn't around much. Which makes sense. Again, this dark reason for his personality makes it a bit tricky to really use him for comedy. So I can definitely still understand if some found this disappointing, if they would have rather found another way to get him to this point, so they could still get more of the Chaotix together, and more of the game dynamic they would have expected and appreciated. Which is why it's so great that we have the Archie Sonic reboot. For most game fans, I feel like the Reboot Chaotix are just about everything you could want. A hilarious detective trio, desperate for cash and struggling to get by. They play off each other perfectly. Vector is the leader who puts up a strong front, Espio is the impassive and stoic cool guy, and Charmy is the hilarious element of chaos that brings way more out of the others. The dialogue is snappy, the art is expressive, and whenever they're around, you know you're in for a good time. There's so much character in the tiniest of moments. Vector getting frustrated and embarrassed when Charmy reveals too much, Espio trying to play it casual and pretend that he isn't afraid of ghosts, Charmy grinning like an idiot when he gets a rise out of Knuckles with his childish games. In this case, what you see is what you get, and what I'm seeing is great. In fact, the three of them get to star in Archie's final Sonic Universe arc, and man, it's fantastic. Alea Baker joins Ian Flynn in writing this one, and the two of them nail it. The premise is simple. A princess has been kidnapped by some pirates, and so her loyal subjects need to find and save her. After hitting a dead end, who else could they go to for help but the Chaotix Detective Agency? First and foremost, everything about the story is built to be entertaining. The plot moves along at a speedy clip as the Chaotix search for and interrogate suspects, get captured by pirates, weasel their way into their ranks, find the princess, search for and discover a destructive treasure, and eventually steal the ship and leave the pirates deserted on an island. And in the end, they learn the princess, tired of her royal duties and wishing to explore the world, was just pretending to be airheaded as she manipulated these pirates until they became too dangerous. And now she's off to keep exploring on her own, all while getting a bit of heart from side characters, learning about what it means to find acceptance and a place to call home. Really, everything about this 4-part story feels like it could be an episode of a Chaotix television show, where each week they solve another mystery, meet a mostly new cast of characters before helping them learn something about themselves and being on their way. In fact, that's one of the biggest compliments I can give this. I now wish that show existed, and before reading this, I never would have even thought of that idea. And a big part of the reason I want that is how funny the Chaotix are here. Everything they do is hysterical. Like here, the way this guy immediately cracks under pressure, divulging all the details of sketchy dealings after the tiniest bit of pressure, paced perfectly to land on a page turn. And then Vector looks all disappointed because he actually wanted to do an interrogation. Espio is great too. He takes on this role as a sort of clueless, overly literal older brother to Charmy. I mean, Charmy's out here making crappy posters while Espio's helping him with the spelling. What more could you ask for? And man, I love these goofballs. You're just being grumpy because pirates are cooler than ninjas.
Vector, Charmy's speaking blasphemy.
Don't make me turn this car around, you two.
The framing has to be one of my favorite things about this story. At the beginning of each issue, we get a page to show off Vector's narration and view of their situation. And so we see how Vector, this guy who wants everyone to take him so seriously, is actually every bit as goofy as Charmy, viewing his life as a detective noir story. No matter how much that doesn't align with reality. At the same time though, that doesn't mean the Chaotix are incompetent. Nah, they'll get the job done, even if things go really off the rails. And even though they may not see themselves as the same type of heroes as the freedom fighters, they'll still do what's right, even if that means they'll lose out on some cash or get destroyed by a bad conversion rate. But, as Vector says, at least Charmy's happy. And that's gotta count for something, right? From start to finish, this story is just constantly moving. There's always a funny line of dialogue, some hilarious character beat or wild expression, or something to endear the reader to this crazy group or otherwise entertain. And it all does a perfect job of showing off the potential of the version of the Chaotix found in Heroes. Really, by the end of this, the Chaotix became a major highlight of Reboot, and though they're pretty different from their Preboot selves, they're still fantastic here. One of the main reasons I think any game fan should give Reboot a shot, regardless of what they think of Archie in general. Overall, the Chaotix add a ton of life to the world of Mobius. Rather than separating them into their own stories where they're the stars of the show, Flynn mostly kept them in supplemental roles, enhancing and adding to other characters, fleshing out the comics world through the variety and humanity they bring to the table. Whether through their understated yet consistently heartfelt presence in Preboot, or the ridiculous and lovable antics that only they can provide to Sonic's rebooted world. Just a bunch of good dudes who are doing their best. However, there are two major things missing from the Reboot Chaotix. Two members that, just like their teammates, are the stars of the last arc of Sonic Universe's Preboot run. Much like the rest of the Chaotix, Preboot Mighty worked great as part of this group. However, he didn't do much beyond that. He was just a sweet, kind-hearted guy who clearly wanted everyone to get along, and was also super strong. Really, there was only one story focused on Mighty himself, a brief set of B-stories in the Knuckles comic that delved into his past. See, Mighty spent time in one of Robotnik's prisons, along with this little guy named Ray. Though Sonic helped rescue a bunch of people, Ray sadly didn't escape, and Mighty believed he died. So when Mighty gets a lead that Ray might be alive, he immediately takes it, even if it means working with a sketchy crowd. And so they finally find him locked in one of Robotnik's safes, trapped in some sort of interdimensional rift or something, whatever. What matters is that Ray was left alone. And despite its unnecessarily convoluted presentation and strange pacing, there was still some potential here. The beginnings of a solid friendship for Ray and Mighty, and the reason they so rarely leave one another's side, and why Mighty is so darn protective of him. And despite barely mentioning Mighty thus far, he's pretty great in the Flynn era, a powerhouse with a heart of gold and a fiery temper, who will always do his best to protect his friends. I mean, his rage over Ray getting hurt is a major reason why the team is eventually able to defeat Eggman here. And the art, man, it sells his fury, and the contrast between that and his usual laid-back, relaxed attitude shows how strongly he feels for Ray. In general, there's also just a depth of emotion to him that makes him really easy to root for and relate to. Like in Knuckles' Universe arc, when he's really trying his best to be here for Knuckles or just do the right thing in general, but he keeps making mistakes and feels like a total screw-up. Look at the poor guy, he feels like crap, but he's just as quick to pick himself back up again. Now, on its own, none of this is anything that special. However, it is impressive because Mighty so rarely gets focus. And yet each of these scenes is so well written and the art is so expressive that there's immediately something to latch onto. A character whose tragic backstory and need to never fail his friends again informs his actions, even if we aren't going to stop the story to make a big deal of it. As for Ray, well, he gets even less time than Mighty, but man, he's likable. This moment where he's with Vector and they're fighting to protect the Master Emerald and Ray scares off the enemies by pretending to go super. It's one of those scenes that always comes to mind when I think of the comic. It perfectly distills down what makes Ray likable. He might struggle to get out the words, but he'll show his loyalty and good heart with his actions. Really, Mighty and Ray are both just great examples of how the Archie Sonic comic fleshes out its world not by spending a ton of time on everyone, but by making economical use of what little time they do receive. The kinds of characters I always want to see and learn more about. Which is why I'm so happy that, in the penultimate story of Preboot Sonic Universe, we finally give Mighty, Ray, and the rest of the Chaotix their time in the spotlight. The premise here is very simple. After Mighty and Ray left to find Mighty's sister, they eventually stopped sending updates to their friends. So now the gang is on the hunt to find them and make sure they're safe. Similar to Reboot's Chaotix arc, this one is largely focused on being fun, even if the stakes are much higher. Many pages are simply dedicated to singing and dancing and silly fights as the Chaotix help anyone they come across on their quest to find their friends. All of it sold with, as usual, fantastic and expressive artwork. And yet, at the same time, these issues are also full of these quick character beats that have a surprising amount of weight to them. Like here, when Mighty is about to finally go see his sister and Ray gets all nervous that this will somehow change things between them, as if Mighty getting his real family back will mean that Ray is no longer necessary. The way he looks so sad and how Vector offers him some words of encouragement. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about with these characters just being likable. And then there's Mighty himself. He's learned that his sister has been taken in by some of Eggman's most unfortunate lackeys, a seemingly kind-hearted group who've been forced to work for him under the threat of destruction. The way he goes off, the rest of his friends wishing him well and giving him their unconditional backup, it manages to sell the emotional weight of this reunion. So, Mighty is finally able to meet her, and... From the outset, this arc had a pretty tough job set out before it. After all, prior to now, Mighty's sister has only really been offhandedly mentioned or showed up as a more distinct-looking grunt. So sure, I care about Mighty enough to want to see him reconnect with her, but his sister Tilly herself? I didn't really have much to latch onto. Which is why it's so impressive that this scene manages to genuinely get me, as is so often the case in this comic. The art is a huge part of this. The way Mighty's pure excitement so quickly gives way to uncertainty and then sadness and then tears as he realizes that the sister he spent so much time looking for doesn't even remember him, doesn't care about him. To her, she never had a brother, and she's been through so much awful stuff in her life that it just doesn't even matter anymore. Not out of malice or anger with him. No, in some ways, this is worse. This is pure apathy. In the end, all Mighty can do is hope that the people here will continue to care for her. And that's that. Whatever he has to say to her, whatever he could try, it seems it won't move her. At least until Ray speaks up.
No! Do you know how long he looked for you? How much it hurt him to think you were dead or gone forever? You may not remember him, but he remembers you. He loves you. I was lost too. Mighty took me in. Thanks to him, I've got a life now. He wants the same for you. You don't remember him? So what? You remember being alone, right? Scared? He won't ever leave you alone again. How can you not want that? He will always be there for you. Like he's always there for me.
And Tilly's response?
Get away from my brother.
And though Tilly is hurt in the fight, These people will do everything they can to keep her safe, heal her up, and eventually get her home. In the meantime, Mighty will be able to visit her, and regardless of anything else, he has his sister back. Ray has one too, and for the first time, Tilly is allowed to hope, to smile, to accept that someone else could love her. And don't forget, you've got us too, big guy. The Chaotix take care of their own. So in the end, the Preboot Chaotix's story finishes not on a wild caper, but on a heartfelt tale of found family and love and cherishing not only those closest to you, but all the security and safety that love brings. As these characters who, in the grand scheme of things, are really a minor blip on the radar of this vast world, get one of the comic's most emotionally resonant stories. And that's why I think the Archie Chaotix are the best Chaotix.